We begin tonight with the latest fast-moving developments with Iran. We're hearing there could be talks between the U.S. and Iran as soon as next week. Is there still a chance of a nuclear agreement? And at this point, what does it matter? Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Moments from now, President Trump is set to arrive home at Joint Base Andrews before making his way to the White House after attending the annual NATO Summit in the Netherlands. The big story out of NATO was supposed to be European members' new commitment to raise defense spending, a long-stated Trump goal since the early days of his first term. But that big win was overshadowed by what could be an even bigger one, depending on how the Iran situation plays out. Best case scenario, a completely new order in the Middle East, unencumbered by the threat of an Iranian nuclear bomb. Worst case scenario, a desperate Iranian regime rushes to build a nuclear weapon, even a crude one, with whatever enriched uranium and missile technology it has left, and deploys it against the so-called Little Satan, Israel, or the Great Satan, the United States. That all depends, in part, on exactly how much damage the American and Israeli airstrikes in the past 2 weeks have done to Iran's nuclear capabilities. At the NATO conference today, the president lashed out at reports suggesting that Operation Midnight Hammer might only have set Iran back a few months.
And the New York Times, they put out a story that, well, maybe they were hit, but it wasn't bad. Well, it was so bad that they ended the war. It ended the war. Somebody said in a certain way, that it was so devastating, actually. If you look at Hiroshima, if you look at Nagasaki, that ended a war, too. This ended a war in a different way.
The White House today is pointing to new statements from the IAEA, the CIA, and Israel, all supporting the administration's claims that the damage was major, if not total obliteration. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard posted on social media today that new intelligence claims what Trump has said numerous times, Iran's facilities have been destroyed, and if they want to rebuild it would take years, are true. So whatever remains under the rubble at Fordo, it takes know-how to enrich uranium. And there's been a bit of an Iranian brain drain recently. At least 14 top Iranian physicists and nuclear engineers were assassinated by Israel's forces in the 12-day war. But the president underscored that this is about more than the physics and engineering of military munitions. It's about morale, hearts and minds, boosting those of our military, discouraging those of our enemy. Trump said that the B-2 stealth bomber pilots who took part in Operation Midnight Hammer last weekend were, quote, devastated over yesterday's reporting on the preliminary intelligence assessments.
And I got a call that the pilots and the people on the plane were devastated because they were trying to minimize the attack. And you know what they said? One of them, I spoke to one of them, said, sir, we hit the site. It was perfect. It was dead on. Because they don't understand fake news.
President Trump said the U.S. will hold talks with Iran next week, but when it comes to getting a new nuclear deal, the president said he now doesn't care if he gets one or not. The implication is that if Iran decides to race toward nuclear capability, Operation Midnight Hammer, the sequel, might be coming soon to a theater of operations near you. Let's go straight now to NewsNation's Kelly Meyer, live for us at the White House. Kelly, a lot of time was spent in that really big international press conference at NATO today with President Trump, with his Secretary of State Marco Rubio, DefSec Hegseth, talking about this preliminary intelligence report from the DIA.
Yeah, and like you said, Elizabeth, really lashing out at those reports and saying that the media was discrediting those B-2 pilots that carried out the mission and he says put their lives at risk. They were calling this all fake news, but then went on to say that this is just a preliminary assessment, low confidence assessment, and not yet the final report. So we've been dealing with this pushback with the Trump administration all day. And as you mentioned, there was that new statement from the CIA that we could read a bit of here, talking about the new intelligence, the new U.S. intelligence documents that they're talking about that says that claims destroyed those Iranian nuclear facilities and nuclear program, saying that CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. And then it goes on to say that when possible, we will also provide updates and information to the American public, given the national importance of this matter and in every attempt to provide transparency. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency report that we were talking about in this preliminary report claimed that the U.S. strikes set back Iran's nuclear program by months, not years, and that components of the program were not destroyed. A U.S. official telling NewsNation tonight that these are still early days and it's normal for intelligence assessments to evolve over time. But I wanted to play a bit of Secretary of State Marco Rubio coming to the president's defense on this today. Take a listen.
Here's a fact. The conversion facility, which you can't do a nuclear weapon without a conversion facility, we can't even find where it is, where it used to be on the map. You can't even find where it used to be.
So Rubio, though, in a less tense moment there at NATO today, caught cracking up behind President Trump when he was talking about and asked about NATO's Secretary General calling the president daddy, referring to President Donald Trump as daddy. I wanted to play a bit of that exchange, the NATO chief tonight clearing that up a bit. Take a listen.
He called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
The NATO Secretary General saying he was referring more to the U.S. as a whole. Is the U.S. staying with us? He says he's asked by other European countries. Now, as you mentioned, too, the president, the other headline from all of this, getting those NATO member countries to agree to 5% defense spending, all except for Spain. And now we are watching for the latest Truth Social post from the president saying that there's going to be another press conference with the Pentagon, at the Pentagon, with the Secretary of Defense, as there is all these questions around the intelligence. And he says, again, bringing up those B-2 pilots and saying that they are disappointed in this coverage of their mission. Elizabeth.
All right, Kelly Meyer reporting live from the White House. For more, I want to bring in retired General and former Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark. And Ali Vyas is the Iran Project Director for the International Crisis Group. Thank you both for being with me. Ali, I want to start with you. What do you make of the fact this is just a preliminary assessment from the Defense Department that the U.S. strike only set back Iran's nuclear program by a few months? It's important to note that the DIA is the most conservative of the U.S. intelligence agencies. There are many more. We've yet to hear their assessments, although the CIA said the damage was considerable.
It's good to be with you. Look, as you said, I think it's too early to judge. The key factor here would be to have people on the ground who can go into these facilities and see exactly what has happened, because there's so much that we can learn from satellite imagery and signal intelligence. At the end of the day, we either have to have boots on the ground or inspectors on the ground who can go into these bunker facilities, see the extent of damage and account for the nuclear material which is now missing. Iran still has 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, which is near bombs grade, and probably hundreds of advanced centrifuges that it had stocked separately. And that provides it with a pathway to dash towards a nuclear weapon. And that's why it is important to get an accurate assessment and eventually get the inspectors on the ground to fully understand what has happened.
General Clark, the DIA report is based on satellite imagery. As Ali just pointed out, nobody's been on the ground yet in Iran. I don't even think Israel's managed to get to do that. How often do these preliminary intelligence reports change?
Well, they would change if you could get people on the ground. And, you know, the first reports are usually wrong on anything, Elizabeth. And so in this case, as Alex said, the big issue is, you know, read the words, severely damaged the program. Didn't say they got all the highly enriched uranium. Didn't say they couldn't build a nuclear device. Didn't say a lot of things that are in danger. What we have, afraid, is a wounded tiger here. We don't know if it's going to turn on us or not, but there seems to be a lot of highly enriched uranium that's missing.
General, if the assessment proves accurate, it doesn't mean there was anything wrong with the execution of Midnight Hammer. It just might mean that Fordo is deeper and more protected than we thought. if by all accounts, the pilots, the crews, everybody involved with Operation Midnight Hammer executed flawlessly.
Oh, I think it was a brilliant operation, brilliant in conception, obviously flawless in execution. The commanders on down get a lot of credit for this. Not just the pilots, but the people who put everything together, the jamming, the escort, the refueling, the fighters that went with it, everything, and the Navy submariners who participated in this. Yeah, it's not the military. We just need to know where we're going from here, Elizabeth.
Ali, Iran's parliament has now approved a motion to stop cooperating with the IAEA. The vote was 221 in favor, 0 against. Is this a sign Iran is about to just become the next North Korea and do this all in secret, kick all the inspectors out?
Well, it is possible. First of all, they are afraid that if they let the inspectors go in, we would actually have answers to some of these questions that we are now debating.
Yeah, where's the uranium?
Exactly. And if indeed they have been able to move the uranium out of those facilities before the strikes, because we have satellite imagery that actually shows that there were some trucks in front of the Fordo facility just a few hours before the strike. If indeed we figure out through the inspectors where the facilities are, they might open themselves up to another attack. But it is also, I think, a negotiating strategy because their physical leverage, which was their nuclear program on the ground, has been now degraded as a result of U.S. and Israeli strikes. So they're trying to generate political leverage in order to, when they're going back to the negotiating table next week, be able to still extract concessions from the U.S.
General, President Trump said today in his press conference that, quote, I don't care if I have an agreement or not with Iran, and that he didn't think it was necessary, even though we are reportedly people from the U.S. will meet with the Iranians next week. We have Iran on the ropes right now. Why wouldn't we insist that they sign a deal and insist that they continue to allow inspectors in to verify it?
I think this is just what Ali said. This is also a negotiating posture. I mean, what you want to do is say, I'm not interested in it. Now, if you want to sign it, that's a good thing. But, it's not that important to us. And then go after it rather than saying, you must sign this. Because, we're playing off against Iran. It's leverage. But I do think the actual ground truth on this is we need an agreement not only on the nuclear piece, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get this regime to simply renounce the end of a 44-year effort to try to destroy another country in the region? We do have the leverage to demand that if we wanted to do that.
And Ali, that ceasefire, it's still holding.
Yes, but it's very fragile because, I do understand why the president said what he said, but at the end of the day, the problem is not resolved. As U.S. intelligence community had said for many years now, we can only set back Iran's nuclear program, but they have the expertise and the knowledge to reconstitute it. And even, 14 nuclear scientists is really not much. If you look at the Isfahan facility, it had 3,000 people working there. Yeah. So the expertise and the know-how is there, and the path for reviving the nuclear program is there. That's why we need a diplomatic solution to basically consolidate our gains through pursuing the military option.
Well, stay tuned. Things are moving fast over there. Who knows what we'll come up with by this time next week. General Wesley Clark, Ali Vargas, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here.
Perfect.
All right, for more now, let's go to NewsNation political editor Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday. Chris, great to have you. So as we await the president's arrival back here at home in the United States any moment now, here's the headline from Politico this afternoon. Trump tallies wins as he leaves NATO Summit. The victory lap continues. So he just got NATO to pay up. His ceasefire is holding, and the U.S. is meeting with Iran next week. It's been an unbelievable run for the president.
Well, did you hear him talking about how much he liked NATO now?
I know.
He was beaming. He said to hear Donald Trump talk about, I thought they were ripping us off. They're not ripping us off. They love their country.
What are we doing it for?
They love me, and it's
yeah,
we're in this together and all of that stuff. These are statements that would have been anathema to Donald Trump, certainly 2016 in the first part of his first term. There's something that American presidents learn, And I think this was, Bill Clinton is a famous case of this, the indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright came to call us. When the United States unleashes its military on behalf of its allies, our allies love it. They think that it is fantastic. The America First, the isolationist, the J.D. Vance energy, when he wrote his op-ed explaining why he was going to endorse Donald Trump, he said it was because Donald Trump didn't fight these wars. He didn't do this stuff. Think back to the Signal chat that they inadvertently included a journalist on. And go read those and listen to how contemptuously J.D. Vance and others are talking about Europe and NATO, and then compare that to what Donald Trump said today. And the answer is American presidents become internationalists because they like the results. They love the results. They love the status, and they also like the results.
Yeah, and the results are inarguably massive just in the last, I can't even say week, it's like the last 4 days. In the meantime, I want to ask you about a political earthquake in New York City last night when a 33-year-old socialist named Zoran Mandani defeated Andrew Cuomo in the primary for mayor. It's being called a seismic election for a man who was polling at 1% a few months ago, who has barely any experience as an elected leader, and at a time when the Democratic Party seems to be at a loss and is wildly disorganized. What does his win tell us?
Well, you know, Andrew Cuomo got into a race he had a theory of the race that he joined, which was that New York didn't want Eric Adams. And he was prepared and probably would have won, I assume would have won handily, a race against embattled incumbent Eric Adams, pardoned by Donald Trump. But then Eric Adams dropped out of the Democratic Party and said he was going to run as an independent. So that left Cuomo in a quandary. What am I running for? If you're not running against somebody, what are you running for? And he couldn't figure out what that was. It didn't come across about why is he running. Now, he did find that late in the race. He found late in the race why he was running.
Right.
And he was running to save New York from a Democratic Socialist like this. And I don't know what would have happened if there would have been a longer primary or whatever else. But I think we see what happens when we see how Eric Adams changed this race.
Well, President Trump is weighing in on this. He posted today that Zoran Mandani, a 100% communist lunatic, has just won the Democratic primary and is on his way to becoming mayor. We've had radical lefties before, but this is getting ridiculous. Mamdani pulled this off by running what one commentator called the TikTok campaign. He was all over social media, walking the streets of New York. He walked the length of Manhattan a couple days ago, stopping for selfies on every corner. He was on everybody's podcasts. Is this what Democrats think will bring them out of the political wilderness?
Well, look, there's a couple things you could take away from this if you're a Democrat. So Mamdani, who was a rapper in a previous life, whose mother was a movie executive, he is good at the communications part of this, right? He is good at the comms part of it. So you could take away that to be personable, to have slick and good ads that connect with people and go viral and all of that stuff. Or you could say that what America wants are government-run grocery stores and that it's time for democratic socialism. Both insights will be taken away, but based on, look, for the folks who are representing, Democrats who are representing congressional districts, or Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, for the folks in New Jersey who have swing seats up in the coming cycle, this is not what they want to see, right?
Well,
the Democratic Party does not want to have to say, well, let me tell you why democratic socialism is actually a good idea, or distance themselves from their young voters. So this is going to be painful and divisive for Democrats as they try to absorb the energy from this, but not attach themselves to the policies.
You know who else doesn't love it, Chris? The business community. And a headline from Axios says Wall Street is terrified of Mamdani, and quotes the president of one business strategy firm as saying, it appears that New York City is electing to commit suicide by mayor. We're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming days, weeks.
Billy Joel had a song about it. So we'll see you all down in Florida next year.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. The mass migration maybe continues. All right, coming up, we're going to have more on this political earthquake that just struck New York City. How far to the left does a politician have to be alarmed? Well, we just found out. I'll speak with the congresswoman who says Zoran Mandani is a socialist and an anti-Semite. She's a Democrat. Plus, Iran's mullahs don't want Trump dead, and we're learning they actually have tried several times to kill him. We're learning more about threats to the president's life that go back for years now. New details on a plot that exposed the president to clear and present danger coming up. Freebies for the people, new taxes on the rich, and more government, always more. In New York City, apparently, that's a recipe for electoral success. The progressive socialist candidate, 33-year-old Zoran Mandani, emerged victorious from New York City's Democratic mayoral primary last night. And this morning, New Yorkers awoke to the reality that this guy could soon be running the show. Mamdani's overnight rise from little-known state lawmaker to presumptive Democratic nominee for mayor of the nation's biggest city has sent shockwaves across the country.
If this campaign has demonstrated anything to the world, it is that our dreams can become reality.
He adopted a freewheeling, talk-to-anybody campaign style and bested a crowded field of Democratic rivals. Among his pledges, according to his own campaign website, freeze rent on city housing, make bus service free, start government-owned grocery stores, offer free child care, give every newborn in the city a free baby basket, raise the city's minimum wage to $30 by 2030, and Trump-proof New York City. Mamdani has said he will fund his very generous services by raising $10 billion in taxes on corporations and all New Yorkers earning more than $1 million a year, at least those who don't pack up and move someplace else. Mamdani has also courted controversy with his very vocal criticism of Israel, and he's accused of being anti-Semitic. Not surprisingly, President Trump called him, as we said earlier, a 100% communist lunatic. But Republicans can't seem to hide their glee at the possibility of Mamdani becoming the new face of the Democratic Party nationwide. That is the doomsday scenario many Democrats are hoping to avoid, including my next guest, New York Congresswoman, Democrat Laura Gillen. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. You said today that Mamdani is too extreme and the absolute wrong choice for New York City mayor. Why?
Look, he ran a campaign based on a bunch of promises, free everything, without any real economic plan to pay for it other than raising taxes. We are facing a cost of living crisis. It is hard for families to get by. By raising taxes, you are not lowering costs. In fact, you're just passing them on to other folks. New York City is the economic engine that drives our state, and we need to make sure New York City thrives. We've already seen a mass exodus of businesses and people leaving New York State. Raising taxes will only cause more people to flee and crater the economy of our city. That's wrong for New York, and we cannot have that.
Well, here's the other big problem. The mayor of New York can't raise taxes. That's not what he doesn't have that power. That belongs to the state legislature and the governor.
Yes, that's in fact. And he ran this campaign with all these promises about all these things that he was going to do. And most of the things that he promised to do, he actually cannot do legally. And the things that he can do, he's grossly underestimated the costs by tens of billions of dollars.
One observer called his plan, quote, economic lunacy. Current embattled mayor Eric Adams called him a snake oil salesman, but there is no arguing that he has caught fire with the far left wing of the Democratic Party. What does this mean for more mainstream Democrats like yourself?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon my Democratic colleagues to speak up and to say what our party stands for. We are not socialists. What we stand for is keeping our communities safe, giving people a safe place to live, but also making sure that we're lowering costs. We're fighting against this bill that's going to raise health care costs for every American and strip health care away from Americans. I'm fighting for my district against things like congestion pricing, which puts more tax burden on my already overtaxed constituents. I'm fighting against the cap on the salt tax, which really, really hurts all the members of my district.
Yeah.
This is the thing that we should be fighting for the working class, fighting for the middle class and preserving the middle class, and not espousing far left ideology.
It is notable that Speaker Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, both New York Democrats, congratulated Mandani for winning today, but they did not endorse him, at least not yet. Do you think they will?
I can't speak to what they'll do, but I certainly have shared my concerns with Leader Jeffries.
Loud and clear. We did read President Trump's reaction. He called Mandani a communist lunatic. Mandani has been very, very critical of Israel's war in Gaza, has even said that he would, if he was mayor, have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrested if he ever came to New York City.
Right, and that hits on another really, really important point. New York City is the home to the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. How can someone who traffics in that kind of speech represent that constituency effectively? His comments are really disturbing. His comments about intifada, calls for violence against Jewish people. It's really inappropriate for someone like that to lead the city of New York.
Yeah, and I think we only have to look at, for example, the great city of Chicago to see what happened to that progressive mayor who was elected there. Is now has abysmal approval ratings there. It's been, according to many people who live in Chicago, a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, listen, look, socialism doesn't work. We need to lower costs for Americans, but in a responsible way. That is what I am fighting to do every single day in Congress, to make sure that the people who live in my district can afford to stay there, that their parents can afford to stay there, and that young people want to come back. And the way we do that is by helping businesses thrive, so there are good jobs for people to come back to, so they can afford to pay the rents and the taxes that we already have to pay in New York, which are pretty high.
Congressman Laura Gillen, thank you so much, from the 4th District in the state of New York. I appreciate you coming on. All right, coming up for us, how close has Iran come to killing President Donald Trump? Well, close enough that his inner circle was extremely concerned for his safety, and we have new reporting on the extreme measures they went to keep him safe. Coming up. Donald Trump has remarked that being president of the United States is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Statistically, he's right. A U.S. president has more than a 1 in 7 chance of being injured or killed by an assassin, and that's with Secret Service protection. The 2024 campaign, of course, made all that very obvious to everybody. President Trump, was the target of not one but 2 assassination attempts. First, there was the attempt on his life at his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, with a bullet just miraculously, barely missing his head. Then there was the gunman lying in wait 2 months later as Trump made rounds at his golf course in Florida. That was last September. Just days after that, Trump posted on social media that Iranian state-sponsored assassins were also trying to kill him. Quote, "Big threats on my life by Iran," he posted. "Moves were already made that didn't work out, but they will try again. Not a good situation for anyone. I am surrounded by more men, guns, and weapons than I have ever seen before." This wasn't just talk. In November of last year, the Biden Justice Department disclosed an Iranian murder-for-hire plot to kill President Trump, charging a man who said he had been tasked by an Iranian official with planning the entire hit. That was clearly still top of mind for the president as he ordered strikes on the country's nuclear facilities. This was his response to a reporter just last Friday when asked how Iran would respond to any military action.
You're even in danger talking to me right now. Do you know that? You are in danger talking to me right now.
We're now learning that threats to President Trump's life by Iran, however, go much further back than last year. Exclusive reporting by the National Review reveals that Trump had to pull out of a visit to Hungary in 2022, months before he launched his presidential re-election campaign, because of concerns that the Secret Service couldn't keep him safe from threats by Iran. Joining me now for more on this is Audrey Fahlberg. She's a political reporter for the National Review. Audrey, it's a fascinating story that you have out today. I want to get into the details of it, but first of all, sources close to President Trump have made it clear to you that all of these Iranian plots to kill Trump had nothing to do with his decision this week to bomb Iran.
Yes, that's a really important distinction here because, sources close to the president suspect and speculate, of course, that this had the effect of hardening his foreign policy resolve when it comes to Iran in terms of underscoring the reality that they wanted to assassinate a president of the United States. And if they're willing to do that and greenlight that decision, what will they do with a nuclear weapon? But as you mentioned, sources close to the president made sure to told me to kind of steer clear from any suggestion from people who are trying to say this is personal for Trump. He just wants to get back at them because of those murder-for-hire plots that were eventually foiled, thank goodness. And that, White House decision-making is not based on something that personal, but goes back to his foreign policy. And his claims that date back to his book in 2011 saying that he really strongly believes that Iran simply cannot have a nuclear bomb.
So talk to me, tell us about the earlier plots. We all know that, the Biden administration charged somebody. Trump announced last year. But actually, the Iranian plots to kill President Trump go back much further than that. Obviously, they date back to when he ordered the hit on Soleimani in 2020. But you write about an incident in 2022 when Trump was supposed to go to Hungary for this CPAC meeting, but only his team ended up going. What did they find out?
So that's an important, you mentioned Soleimani, that's the most important thing here. Ever since 2020, when he ordered that strike during his first term, he was on high alert that the Iranians wanted to avenge that military commander's death because he was such an important military figure in Iran. And ever since Trump left office in January 2021, after his first term, there was a lot of concern among his inner team, his smaller team, when he was deciding whether to run for re-election about the state of Secret Service and how much protection that he was actually getting. So in May 2022, he was weighing whether to go to that conservative conference in Budapest, Hungary, but they decided against it because of concerns that the Secret Service could not keep him safe. So they ended up not going to that conference, which really suggests that this was a serious concern. There was always a latent threat, but this, once they started getting more intel, it really started to heat up, especially amid concerns that he wasn't getting enough Secret Service protection, and that really got a lot worse throughout the campaign.
Yeah, and you also report that President Trump and his staff went to the Biden administration repeatedly to ask for more Secret Service protection in light of these threats.
Repeatedly throughout the campaign, Susie Wiles and other aides complained to people rightfully that he was not getting enough protection. And obviously, we learned how important that was given the security lapses that we saw over the summer in Butler, Pennsylvania, obviously. But again, it's really important to emphasize here, very few people on Donald Trump's team knew about the extent of this Iranian threat. When you talk to most mid or even junior or mid-level staffers on the campaign, they didn't really talk much about Iran. They were more concerned that a rogue domestic actor would try to assassinate the president. We saw a lot of concern. That was a rightful concern as well.
Right.
But the intel briefs about Iran in particular were really just kept on close wraps with the president and his innermost advisors.
And you were also told about this incident with drones?
That's right. Well, we've heard there have been some widely reported incidents about, a time where I believe Axios reported this when the Secret Service had to shoot down a drone from a motorcade. But what my sources told me that there was another time after Butler where there were two suspicious-looking men in the parking lot of the Florida headquarters for the campaign, where people were flying a drone around the building and people tried to chase them down, but they sped away before they were apprehended. And their motives are still unknown. But the fact that a former senior campaign officials told me they were concerned about Iran suggests how serious that threat was.
Yeah. Audrey Fahlberg, it's a fascinating read in the National Review out today, showing that this has really been a long and very serious concern by Trump and his staff. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to share your reporting with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, coming up for us, what would it take? What would happen if food stamps no longer existed? Well, our next guest says President Trump's big, beautiful bill has a big problem when it comes to helping low-income families buy healthy food. We'll get into that in a moment. And remember, you can download our NewsNation app for the latest news on the top stories of the night. You can find it on the Apple App Store and Google Play. All right, another win for everyone trying to make our food supply in America healthier. Nestle just announced that it will remove all artificial dyes from its foods by next year. It's just the latest big food company to announce such a move, joining the likes of Kraft, Heinz, and General Mills. This comes as Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill this week requiring warning labels on some food items. And starting in August, 7 types of harmful food dyes will be banned from school lunches in West Virginia. Now, look, we can all agree that good nutrition keeps us healthy, but how to implement these changes to our diet is still up for debate. And our next guest has some ideas. CEO of Nourish Science, Gerald Mand, just published new findings that show that RFK Jr.'s recent Make America Healthy Again report got almost everything right when it comes to nutrition being linked to chronic illness. We should note that this same report was just torched during yesterday's congressional hearings because it had several citation errors. But Mand's bigger concern is with Trump's big, beautiful bill. The current version is proposing big cuts to SNAP benefits like food stamps. So how do low-income families afford healthy food items that Maha says they need to be eating to get healthy again? Here with us is the CEO of Nourish Science, Gerald Mand. He's also a public health professor at Harvard School of Public Health. You know, healthy food is expensive food. How do we get this into mainstream America's diet if they can't afford it?
Well, good evening, Elizabeth, and thank you for having me back again. The way we need to do it is companies need to produce food that we can thrive on and so it doesn't make us sick. The burden should be on them. It shouldn't be on us to try to buy food. If they're going to sell food in a store, it's the law. They need to do the testing and ensure if it's eaten as they intend it to be. So if it's a snack food eaten every day or a ready-to-heat and eat meal, you need to be able to eat that and thrive or certainly not get sick. And that's not what they're doing. And the government needs to hold them accountable.
Nourish Science published data that shows that more than 86% of people have what's considered a low-quality diet. 86%? That's almost everyone.
You're right, and we use the government's own data. There's something called the NHANES. It's the Health Examination Survey, where we go out and survey Americans and see what we eat. And then we used another government tool. It's called the Healthy Eating Index. It gives Americans a grade if you're healthy, if you follow, how much do you follow the dietary guidelines. If you have a score of 90 or above, you get an A, and if you're below 60, you get an F. So we applied the government's own grading system against what people are eating as they found in the NHANES study, and we found, as you said, 86% of Americans have a score actually of less than 60. So it's really failing, and of course we can tell that that's accurate by how sick we are. The fact that we have the shortest lifespans, and our children are sick.
What do we need to be eating more of, and what do we need to be eating less of? Because the reason I ask that question is because I'm pretty sure I know the answer because I've read so much of your stuff. But what we need to be eating more of is the most expensive stuff. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, whole foods, whole grains. Those are all really expensive, and poor people often can't afford it or don't have access to it.
Well, they're not expensive in the way you think. You know, when I was at USDA, we had read those studies and which we had them redo it. It turned out the original studies that said eating a fresh produce is so expensive was based on a per calorie basis. When we had them redo the data on a volume basis, which is what fills our bellies, produce in season is some of the cheaper food. But here's the problem. That's how much it costs to get it at the store. The cost that makes it so prohibitive for so many Americans, particularly low-income Americans, is the time cost of translating those whole foods into meals,
right?
The preparation of the food. And that's what really is the sticking point, that it takes too much time. And that's what's the sort of potential wonder of processed foods. They can be convenient. You can heat them right up and eat them. And what we need to do then is not to force people to make all their food themselves, not to force them to have to study labels, force the companies to make the foods that when people eat them, they'll thrive. That's the business they're in. It's kind of like if you were in the car business, job one is people need to get safely from one to A to B, and then you have a lot of things to add value to your car. That's about food. Food, you should be able to eat it and thrive. And companies need to, the CEOs of companies need to insist on that, and the government needs to insist on it.
Yeah, at the very least, if I'm going to eat some snacky food or something, it would be nice not to have all those dyes and chemicals in them. It looks like we're well on the way to getting those things out. Gerald, always great to talk to you. We'll have you back because we didn't even tackle the big, beautiful bill and what this might mean for low-income folks and losing their access to SNAP. We'll have you on again to talk about that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, coming up, back to our top story. We're hearing there could be nuclear talks between the United States and Iran as soon as next week. At least that's according to President Trump. Chris Cuomo will join me next to talk all about it. All right, Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris, you've got former CIA director and retired Army General Petraeus to join you. He's going to talk all about, I'm sure it'll be interesting. I interviewed General Wesley Clark. I'll be curious to hear General Petraeus' take as well on those initial preliminary DIA reports, all these conflicting reports, all the arguing over what was a brilliantly executed military strike.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is just fringe politics at play. The reason that some in the media and a lot on the left want this to have failed is just political advantage. It's not facts. So just like you, I like having experts on here who have fought for our freedoms to talk about what do you look at to judge the success and what does that tell us? That's the way to do it. Everything else is just politics.
General Clark said often those preliminary DIA reports are wrong. Like not sometimes, they are often wrong.
Yeah, it's just an addiction to gotcha. Which is just one more symptom of an extremism that I am consumed with because it's consuming us.
Meantime, President Trump is winging his way back. I think he might have just landed or is about to land at Joint Base Andrews. He has had an extraordinary, like not even 24 hours at NATO.
Yes, very whirlwind, typical Trump. Right? You know, so much thrown up into the air, and yet he's still commenting on all these things that are happening back here. Very typical. Where it leads, who knows?
All right, Chris, take it away.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.